welcome to They Think It's All Sober, Mr. Spencer Matthews.
Delighted to be here.
How are you?
I'm very well, mate. Very well.
Full day of podcasting?
I just came from a podcast, but this will be my last podcast today.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just the double dip.
Just a cheeky double dip.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We've been connected through some wonderful people at your company, and we're very grateful to have you on. But we're looking forward to this chat. And I guess whole premise that we spoke about briefly is just to give people an insight into our guest relationship with alcohol, their journey, and kind of what led them to the point of reevaluating their relationship with alcohol.
Sure, and I suppose that's exactly what it is, right? It's a journey, and actually, sat here talking to you guys, I almost feel like it's an interesting thing to have lived both sides of it, because it's a very difficult thing to have an opinion about anything, a meaningful opinion, without really truly understanding it. And I've been in some pretty dark places with alcohol, and in many ways, the natural instinct is to regret those times, but without those times, it'd be difficult to understand the necessary action to take in order to change for the better. And I find myself with a really great relationship with alcohol, in my opinion. I'm not completely teetotal, but I may as well be. I drink, incredibly rarely, don't ever really think about it or look forward to it, but it does happen. I think it's like you two are both teetotal, right? Yeah. So I was for years, about 3.5, 4 years, didn't touch a drop. I began to feel firstly quite comfortable with feeling like I no longer had a problem with it, and I know that this is a very slippery slope for some people. But for me, most of my alcohol abuse came in my earlier life, so kind of late teens, throughout my 20s, when my responsibilities were kind of near non-existent, right? So it's kind of like there always felt like a good reason to go out and drink, with very little downside, really, because it's not. I didn't have that much on at the time. I was quite lazy, quite unambitious, didn't have much discipline. I was quite inconsiderate, quite selfish, and it took a kind of sustained beating, on the body to kind of understand that there's probably more to life. And I would look back at kind of my aspirations as a young kid, always just assuming that I could be whatever I wanted to be and grow to be someone of great importance if that's what I wanted, right? And those feelings began to change, and it kind of started haunting me a bit. I started to feel like a real loser for quite a lengthy period, around the Made in Chelsea time. And I just started to feel like, actually, I look at CEOs of businesses or interesting founders or people that I look up to and naturally gravitate towards and respect, and I'm nothing like them. I don't have what they have. I don't have their drive. I don't have their work ethic. And why is that? And why do I feel the need to drink so much and to be a kind of deflated version of who I could be?
So you started questioning, I suppose, at that point, the sort of function of alcohol within your premise, because we always talk about it as in a timeline. Generally, for most people, we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of alcohol, because when you rewind to earlier days, some of my fondest memories are ones with alcohol that were good. We're growing up and the park drinking and the ciders and going around your mates in the first parties and stuff. So I guess from our perspective, I think and our listeners find it quite useful to perhaps sort of timeline the relationship. So maybe it would be quite good if we could go back, I suppose, to those early days of young Spencer and what the kind of relationship that alcohol played in your life. So should we time machine it?
Do you want to step into my time machine?
I would love nothing more.
There we go.
And we are back.
Right. Okay.
So we're back.
Young Spencer. So you were talking.
Your face then was like, what the fuck have I signed up? This would happen at Global.
We'd have a button. No, so yeah, let's talk about, I guess, like your youth. Like, what were your sort of memories of alcohol growing up? Like, I guess in terms of like family, was drinking quite prevalent when you were growing up, or was it just parents' healthy relationship and everything there? Or
I never noticed any kind of bad relationship with alcohol within my family growing up.
Sure.
That said, everyone in my family drinks alcohol. There's nobody that is teetotal in my family. But I would never notice as a child, mum's a bit wonky tonight. Or never, not once. I've actually, thinking about it, because I've not ever thought about this really, I don't think I've ever seen either of my parents out of control, ever.
Interesting.
Yeah. That said, we've all, drank to excess together on days out and New Year's Eve or whatever it might be. But it certainly never felt like a habitual thing. My parents are not the kind of people that, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, but that would crack open a bottle of wine every night and have a glass of a gin and tonic every day. Like that's not them. So no, my problem drinking developed all on its own.
Right. Did it all by yourself?
Yeah, I have no one to blame really, but myself. And again, it's looking back and whether or not you resent yourself or you regret your behaviors. And as we've already touched on, I think as we've said, it's a journey. It's part of who you are today. But no, I think I grew up in a hotel, right? A lot like from about the age of 7 until the age of about 11. I grew up in a hotel in the French West Indies, actually. And like life before that, I don't think, we can touch on it if you want, but this is probably where I spent most of my time with interesting characters that did drink, right?
Sure.
And because we had a number of cool guests that would come through the hotel who would drink all day because they're on holiday.
Yeah.
And it probably gave me a sense that, drinking recreationally, regularly was cool because these people were cool. They were all successful people that could afford a nice hotel, who had interesting jobs and characters. But, you're seeing them in a window where they are at their most free and relaxed.
And probably where they're drinking more than they would on a usual day.
And it's not real life.
Yeah.
Being on holiday, drinking margaritas all day is not, how most people live their lives ordinarily. But I had years of exposure to that as a kid. And again, I wouldn't swap my childhood for anything. Then, of course, my brother passed away when I was 10. He was the youngest Brit to climb Mount Everest at the time. He went missing on the mountain. And, I've had some therapy in my adult life, but never really addressed the kind of the grieving process as a kid. I preferred just to shove it under a rug and ignore it.
Yeah.
And, I'm told that deaths in the family when you're young, if not dealt with correctly, can lead to certain kinds of behaviors. But I've never been comfortable blaming anyone but myself for my hedonism.
It's so funny you say that because, I lost my father at 9 to drug addiction, and I did the same thing, just buried it. And all the therapy was like, well, this could have been this or this could have been this. But I'm the same. I've always just been like, well, maybe that was just my decision to do those things.
I think in death, there's kind of two paths that individuals ordinarily take, right? You either you spend an awfully long time grieving, and it becomes a kind of almost negative crutch on you, and you blame certain things in your life on that event, and it lives with you in a kind of negative way. I've certainly seen in my life, and or you can try to accept that there's no changing it, and you try to use it as a force for good. In a few things that I've done since addressing my relationship with alcohol, I certainly know that Mike is very present with me, and I look at his lack of fear and adventurism, is that a word? I think people probably know what I mean. At his young age, to go and conquer the highest peak in the world. as being nothing but really exciting. And like, I want that for myself and even my kids, you know, I think living an adventurous life, free of ordinary fear is really exciting.
Yeah, that's what I took, because I mentioned before the pod. I watched the documentary, and that was my biggest takeaway. Is like, wow, what a magnificent like thing to go and do, and like just in terms of ambition, which, you know, we can come on to, but I'm sure, as you said, is present with you and has inspired you to go and do the stuff that you've done and are currently doing. So, but no, that's great. And I think touching on the timeline. So, you know, it's a relatively healthy relationship with alcohol growing up, relatively normal with parents. Where did the sort of the serious drinking begin for you? Was it sort of late teens?
I would drink pretty regularly as a teenager. You know, I remember having a bottle of vodka when we were very young in our first year of, not high school, what we call school, I guess. So we're 13 at this stage, boarding, and we would have, you know, me and some of my pals at 13 had a bottle of vodka in a water bottle, so disguised as water. Wow. And, you know, it wouldn't be a regular thing, obviously, at that age. Nobody really enjoys drinking vodka, I don't think, when you're 13, but you do it because it makes you feel kind of cool and grown up. And, you know, you're exercising your independence for possibly the first time at boarding school. So I remember bits and bobs of that. And then, you know, age 15, 16, we're drinking pretty regularly at that stage. That's you know, several pints a week whilst at school. But the problem drinking, I suppose, probably started when I became a forward foreign exchange broker at ICAP. And it was just completely normal to just get hammered every day. Right. And like, it wasn't only normal, it was completely encouraged by senior members of the desk, the boss. You know, we would be taken out. My very first day, I was taken to the pub at about 11:30 or whenever it opened, right? And my desk head at the time bet me £1,000, one-way bet, right? So I'm not betting £1,000 at that stage, right? It's day one of my, you know, glitzy career in the city, that I couldn't drink 4 pints of Guinness in 60 seconds, right? And I was just like, well, I know I can do that, right? I was an animal drinker, by the way, and he was like, I'll give you £1,000 if you can do 4 pints of Guinness in 60 seconds. So I was like, and what if I can't? And he was like, nothing. I was like, okay. So, you know, did that. And then the first kind of 30 days of ICAP was similar stuff, like lots of drinking bets, you know, drink 10 pints of Guinness a day, you know, back to the office then after that. And obviously you're kind of useless at that stage. So you're not really performing your duties as a broker either. It's kind of more of a social club, falling asleep on the tube on the way home, waking up at the end of the line with, you know, 5 missed calls from your girlfriend saying like, where the fuck are you? You know, you said you'd be home at 6:30.
We've got dinner.
Meanwhile, you're in, you know, wherever the end of the central line is. Mordor, yeah.
No, Mordor, not Mordor.
Mordor's better.
Maybe. Depends how good the night was for Mordor.
So all this stuff kind of seemed fun at the time. And you develop a massive tolerance, right? Like I gained, you know, 2-3 stone in weight. Suddenly became, you know, quite big for me at least, and you know, you don't even really notice it coming on. Made in Chelsea came around. That was also a pretty boozy affair. You know, sometimes we're required to be in one place for a whole day shooting what should be quite a normal scene, and that place happens to be a pub, so you get really bored halfway through doing it, and then you've got to shoot it from different angles and do the same thing over and over again. So naturally you just kind of get stuck into more and more drinks. And I don't know, I had no real I didn't care about my health at the time, and it wasn't particularly kind of, nobody that I spent time with really consciously cared about their health. It was almost like at that age, rolling out of a nightclub at 6 a.m. was really cool. And it was like being the center of attention, being the loudest, being out the latest, drinking the most, meant that you were a cool guy, basically. And it is the reality of it. And it took developing a real issue with booze, where I would drink on my own, and I would drink at home on my own. And, you know, I'd put on a film in the evening and drain half a bottle of whiskey, you know, and you'd go to bed drunk, you know, for no reason.
Yeah.
That I started to feel like, okay, like this is too much now. I can't actually, you know, I remember dragging myself off to bed and like hitting into walls and stuff. And I was just like, I'm not even like partying or having fun. I'm just like, and you'd wake up feeling this sense of dread and regret. And that became constant, you know, that started happening a lot. And it's like, okay, like I'm going to turn into a real fucking loser if I don't get a grip on this. But you know, it's also, sorry, I realize I'm doing a lot of talking.
No, that's fine. No, I was just going to ask one question actually, obviously, because you said about this, there was a switch obviously between corporate life and then obviously becoming quote unquote a celebrity.
Yeah.
Did that, it sounds like you were already maybe in a drinking pattern, but was there an effect on maybe you as a human being? Because obviously you've probably gone from city job to being all over the television and the media. Did that play into your drinking, or kind of the version of you that you felt you had to present?
I was already a very heavy drinker by the time Made in Chelsea came around, and my mindset was like insanely arrogant at the time. Like I didn't really care what people thought about me. I didn't really care that my behavior on that show was quite extreme when it came to other people's feelings.
Right.
I was, by the way, that changed. The first series I was quite sweet, I think. And then like it kind of gradually descended into darkness.
Right.
Because, you know, a few of us who were more seasoned quite early on saw it as a business and as a job. And if the show is boring and if, you know, good content is not created, the show will be cancelled and we'll be back in the city or back, you know, doing, you know, normal jobs in inverted commas. And it was great fun. But it was kind of, we understood the need for drama, and often being a little inebriated would create the drama, or at least assist in creating the drama. So, but yeah, I mean, my life was just a social hub of activity. I had no plan. I had no discipline. You know, if I wasn't drinking, I would be bored.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the reality of it. And Made in Chelsea, you know, I would film 3 days a week, maybe perhaps 4 days a week, leaving 3 days a week with like nothing on.
Yeah.
I hadn't exercised my entrepreneurial mind at that time. You know, I was just kind of winging it and hoping the show went on. But yeah, it was certainly an interesting time because the reality TV thing wasn't rife at that stage. It was quite a new thing.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And it was kind of cool. But also Twitter was brand new. This is how old I am. Twitter was new.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think we're about the same age, and I fully remember Twitter coming in like, wow, I can just speak my thoughts into the fucking world.
And people can comment on you, right? And your appearance and your behavior.
Yeah.
And it was kind of weird. It's like, I still think that there's an extraordinary and somewhat worrying level of access when it comes to social media. Like the fact that, now you can turn your DMs off on Instagram. You actually never used to be able to, I don't think. So the fact that like a stranger can send me a direct message to my phone, and I'm not like big and famous by any means, but you know, I probably get 100 DMs a day, right? And the fact that people can message me and call me whatever they want, right? And I see it is strange to me.
It still baffles me, that whole process, that someone can just have an opinion.
I think if you put content out and people comment on the content, fine. You're kind of asking for it, right?
Yeah.
You're saying like, what do you all think of this video? Like, do you like it? Is it cool? That's what you're doing every time you post anything. But just like, you also just have this gaping inbox for anyone to just
you're a prick, like, I haven't done anything.
Yeah, exactly. I still get certain things like the way you treated that person in series 2. It's like, that was 12 years ago.
Yeah, get over it.
Are you catching up on?
It sounds to me like, I suppose, in that whole.
I'm just thinking of someone there just sat there being like, season 1, episode 3. I really hate the way that you looked at Jamie.
I get that all the time. It's like, oh, it's such a relief to see you now compared to. It's like, fucking hell, like I have no idea what you were doing when you were 15. And I'm glad that I don't. It's too much info.
Yeah, thank you.
I hate how you failed that geography test.
20, it's ages ago, 18 years ago.
Yeah, I guess like at the time when I suppose all that's going on, I mean, we're the same being in music, and you know, I've certainly seen the same being in an industry, both like working as like DJ, producer, that when you have like periods of success and limelight, the perception is there's absolutely no problem with alcohol. It's just part of the job, right? And like you're saying, with Made in Chelsea, you want to make it more interesting, having a few drinks and essentially maybe even playing up, for lack of a better word, was kind of went hand in hand.
Well, the scene wouldn't be accepted sometimes, right? So we do a scene ordinarily, like we'll do a scene and like the conversation's a bit boring because we're not that interesting, really. If left to our own devices, we're probably not that interesting. And it's kind of, we'd have to do it again. And maybe you can change your opinion on this and that. And maybe you two can have a different opinion. Okay, we'll film it again. And you do it over and over again until somebody blows a gasket, basically, of being so bored and drunk, right? And then, okay, we got the scene, and it's kind of like, okay, great, cool. But no, so with the booze, it's kind of what I feel, and people's opinions on success and the way they define success is different per person, and that's fine. Lots of people are really ambitious, some people aren't, no problem. Like, a lot of people would see being on television as just being like really successful, and it's kind of, I think happiness plays into it as well, right? If you're on a popular show but you're unhappy or you're drunk or you've got a terrible relationship with alcohol, and actually once the cameras stop rolling you don't feel complete or whole or purposeful, then you're not really successful, right? It's kind of like you're living a life that you'd probably love to change. And I think if you're not comfortable and you're not happy, it's very difficult to describe yourself as successful. So, I see things as, again, back to the journey thing, as a kind of harrowing thought that I find myself thinking about from time to time. Is that time is completely constant, right? Like time just ticks on, regardless of who you are, what you're doing, same for everyone. And so as an older person with a good relationship with alcohol now, you almost feel like you have more time, right? Because you're less wasted. You're spending your time doing things that you probably feel are more productive than getting drunk. And that's what gives me the drive to remain clean, because you want to make, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but I would love to make a difference with my life. I'd love to do interesting things. I would love to make my family and my kids and my parents proud of me. Those things matter to me now, right? Whereas they never used to before. And I think if you can use the time that you have productively and effectively, you will be happier as a result anyway, because you will feel better about yourself. And so if you're using your time effectively, then there's less room for alcohol in my life. For me, I find it very difficult to drink and be effective and productive. I personally can't do both things. Like if I were to go out now and have a couple of beers, I will not get my CleanCo stuff done properly later. I will push things into the following day. Tomorrow morning, I will be less motivated to work out. I'll probably not go, running, all these things that kind of matter to me now to keep myself in a position where I'm comfortable. I probably won't do. And that,
the domino effect, isn't it?
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons why I find long periods of total abstinence great, because I really feel like I can progress. And I'm a big fan of kind of growing and developing. And I can't do that drunk.
Yeah. No, it completely makes sense. I was just going to say it sounds like you've been very conscious about your drinking, even when you were doing it. And you talked about, drinking half a bottle of whiskey and feeling, stumbling to bed.
Yeah.
Were you fully conscious at that time, like, this probably isn't normal? Or were there people in your life? Because normally we find that quite a lot of people have someone that goes, at some point in time, holds a mirror to you and you go, fuck you, but then push it off. Was there someone that ever said, do you think you need to get a lid in it? Or
it's when the big animals in my social group started taking umbrage with it.
Right.
That I realized, hang on a sec, it's a bit rich coming from you type thing. But, there were nights where I was so bored that I would drink, right? And I would have some friends round and they would say hey dude, do you need another whiskey or should we just go to bed? And I was just like, what? Like, and these are people that I've been partying with for years.
Yeah.
And seeing the kind of, seeing the almost disapproval in their eyes was a bit like, well, hang on a sec. Like, obviously I know I get this from my parents or my wife or my brother or people you'd expect it from, but from you it just felt rich. Right?
And you hypocrite.
But that's when I would wake up and be like, hang on a sec, for that dude to fucking tell me to go to bed, it's a bit fucking strong, isn't it? And it's I addressed the situation kind of really aggressively, really quickly, because that's just the way I am. Like, if I'm going to get into fasting, I'm going to do 50 23-hour fasts in a row, boom. If I'm going to get into running, I'm just going to fucking run marathons straight away, bam. I'm an all or nothing kind of person. And my wife, I could tell, she was my fiance at the time, I could tell that if I didn't address my drinking that I was going to lose her.
Right.
And she was pregnant at the time with our first son. And I just, it comes back to the kind of feeling like a loser thing. I was just like, why would I allow myself to lose all this great stuff?
Yeah.
When what I could do is just get fit and healthy.
Yeah.
Put the fucking bottle down or pour it down the sink or whatever. And just give myself a real chance of being who I've always wanted to be. And it takes no time at all. Like, you guys know, as sober guys, obviously I could probably speak for the three of us where there might be times where it's like, wouldn't mind a drink, to be honest, particularly with 3 kids. But it's kind of like, it's that we're better off without it.
Yeah.
Really.
The benefits massively outweigh every one of those moments where you go, and especially, how old are your kids?
5, 3 and turning 2 shortly.
Wow, so I've got 1 5-year-old, so I can only imagine what your life is like. And I know that full well that, like, hung over me. That's one of the things that I'm actually most proud of, is that I've stopped drinking for nearly 2 years now, and I don't think Zach will ever remember me being hungover.
Yeah.
And that's really important for me, as, like, we talk about accountability, and, doing this podcast is great for accountability. There's a lot of people that it's helping, but also that for me is an important one, that, relationships massively improved. That thought that Zach will never know, me being, slumped on the sofa going, fuck my life, and like all the rest of it.
I think it's a naively alcoholic thought to think that your shit relationship with alcohol is not affecting other people.
Yeah.
And you see that all the time. And it's interesting to me because, I know people who are alcoholics. Whether they realize it or not is none of my business, really. Like people have to ask for help, right? In order to listen properly to help. It's you're almost always going to have a negative reaction if you're trying to help someone if they haven't asked you, right?
Yeah.
Like, particularly with alcoholics, because it's an insulting word, really. Like, it's not really understood, in my opinion. That's why I don't mind calling myself an ex-alcoholic or an alcoholic or a problem drinker. I think it's important to have a well-rounded view of the terminology. But it does sound like, when you refer to someone as an alcoholic, it sounds like they're on a park bench shooting up, in front of a bunch of kids in the middle of the day. And, that's not necessarily the case. I know loads of high-functioning alcoholics who drink, bottle of champagne every day and run like insanely successful businesses, are great fathers, blah, blah, blah. So maybe don't address it. If it's not a problem, then perhaps live with it. But it's almost always going to affect the people around you. And the problem drinking thing is probably far more common than people realize.
Yeah. So for you at that point then, when you realized, what were your first steps? Did you speak to your wife or fiance about it, or did you go on a mission yourself? Like, what were kind of the first 4 weeks of your sober journey? What did they look like?
I announced to her that I was done with it. So I'm never going to drink again. And did the whole push through the whole everyone doubting me thing. I found it, and this is just me, this is not advice or a recommendation to people who believe they might be a problem drinker. And by the way, if you think you have a problem with alcohol, then you have a problem with alcohol. Nobody with a normal relationship with alcohol ever questions that they're an alcoholic. If you're sat at home or listening to this and you're saying to yourself, shit, I think I'm probably an alcoholic, then, I'm afraid to say you probably are, right? But you shouldn't worry too much about it. Like, there's so many things you can do to move into kind of greener pastures and be healthier. And I think health has to be at the center of all of it. You asked me a question which I've since forgotten.
What were your first 4 weeks?
Yeah. I ramble. I'm a podcaster myself. My first 4 weeks. So yeah, I became healthier almost immediately, clearer minded almost immediately, on day 3. So, that for me was quite a sustained period of not drinking. I drank every single day for a long time. Not always like madly to excess, but I would have had alcohol in my system in some form.
Even a couple of beers.
Yeah, maybe, or a glass of wine. It wasn't always like drooling and crawling to bed, but that happened enough, as I said, in within the space of about a month for me to go, okay, right, I'm out of this. And my wife never put me under any kind of like mad pressure either. I could just tell that like the level of disappointment was becoming quite palpable. So yeah, I just pulled the ripcord on it. I just stopped drinking, started running, started being outdoors a bit more. And literally, people ask me all the time, like, how long did it take you to feel the benefits of sobriety? Days, 2 days, 3 days. This is coming from a pretty aggressive base, right? That's a big change. If you're the kind of person that only drinks on a Friday, you're probably not going to feel that different if you don't drink for a few weeks because you're drinking once a week. No, but for me it was a big difference. The clarity of mind was crazy. The additional hours in my day were wild, right? With CleanCo, we've got this stat that reckons that the average person spends 252 hours hungover every year. Like, that's less than an hour a day. For me, it was like 4 times that, right? So like, call it 252 hours is 10 and a half days. I was probably wasting a couple of months a year, right? Like just sleeping or trying to sleep, feeling sorry for myself, beating myself up, feeling shit, not really being present, going to meetings but not performing in the meetings, being wound up that I don't get the job. It's like, you don't look good, you don't feel good. Why the fuck would you get the job? Do you know what I mean? So anyway, I've gone off on a tangent again. So 4 days, 5 days, I started to feel huge benefits. Weight started to fall off me. I started to be able to run better. I got much stronger in the gym. I found that having that routine was incredibly helpful to me. I was fortunate enough to be in a position to have a personal trainer at the time. I realized not everyone is, but like that added that additional layer of accountability because you don't want to let them down. I started talking to someone. That person was Chip Summers. He was hilarious actually, like because I'd spoken to him before, and I'd done 6 months of sobriety. This is before all of this happened, a few years before. And my agent at the time sent me in to meet this guy. He said basically, look, I'm not going to represent you anymore because you miss meetings, you're fucking drunk all the time. Go and see this guy, he's going to straighten you out. And in my head at the time, I was like, I don't have a problem. This is bollocks. Like, the meeting wasn't that important anyway. Who gives a shit type of thing. And I turned up to see Chip, and I walked into his office, and Chip went, whew. I was like, what? And he was just like, you reek of alcohol. and I hadn't drank that day. And I purposefully not drank that day so that I could turn up with bells and whistles on, so that this guy would report back to my former agent that there's nothing wrong with this dude, he's very fine. And I sat opposite him and he went, oh my God. He's like, when was the last time you drank? I said, I had a couple of drinks last night. And he was like, pfft. He goes, when you leave here and my next client arrives, I'm going to have to open all the windows, right, so that my client doesn't think that I've been drinking.
And you're like, fuck, my plan's gone horribly wrong.
Yeah, no, and I was like, fucking hell, maybe I should see this guy a bit more. And he gave me the very simple task. He said, we had a big chat about drinking, and I really liked him, actually. Like, a lot of what he said really resonated with me. And he said, I want you to do 7 days off the booze. Just like, we're going to arrange a meeting for next week, same time, and I want you to not drink for 7 days. I want you to turn up and see how you feel. And I did that, and I just loved it. Like, I loved it. I don't know if you guys remember your first feelings of feeling like a superhero.
Yeah.
That's how it feels. Like people have seen Limitless, Bradley Cooper. It's like you're on those pills, and like I don't know. It's kind of everything about your goals and your ambitions just transforms almost immediately. It's like, oh, that goal that I set myself is shit. Let's 10x it. And it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm a particular kind of person, so I go really hard into stuff, and I went really hard into sobriety, and I just loved it. And more recently, this was a higher stakes game, right? Like with the getting hammered at home. And by the way, I'd become just complacent. Like I did the 6 months. It was almost too easy. I loved it so much that I thought, well, I probably didn't have a problem in the first place. And so I just started hitting the booze again, because I thought, oh, well, if I've done 6 months, then
I'm good.
Who nobody can call me an alcoholic. I've just been sober for 6 months.
Yeah.
So that was the plan there, and that just went downhill again. And I'm in a state now, particularly this year actually, where I'm just like really health conscious, not trying to be like some crazy founder who's the most productive person ever. Like I'm not about that at all. Just caring an awful lot about my health. Finding myself happier than I've ever been, not touch booze for a little while now, and by touching booze I mean like have the odd drink. But even that feels like something I'm not looking forward to, like in the future. I was toying with the idea yesterday of just like never drinking again, but I just think it's a big and kudos to you guys. I have no idea about what you guys were like before or whatever. But like, it feels a really big thing to achieve that when you say like, I'm never going to touch alcohol ever again. It's almost like you're depriving yourself from something you might want. And so even though I don't want it now, I probably am just going to use slightly different words around the whole thing.
Just the language is key, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't drink alcohol. Don't feel like it at the moment. Whatever. Just keeps people at bay. I just think I've declared myself as teetotal before you see, and then you have the odd drink and someone sees you and all of a sudden it's a massive problem and like, oh my god, he's fallen off the wagon. We're actually super happy, don't feel like you have a problem anymore. Everything at home is great, and it's just that it's almost like that you're setting, in my particular experience, I would feel like I'm setting myself up for a fall at some point. So I'd prefer to say I'm not teetotal, but I don't drink. That's
great. I think everyone has to just like recognize themselves what they want to gain and achieve from changing their relationship with alcohol. So for some people, it could be that actually midweek drinking, switching those beers to zeros. CleanCo. We'll come to that. So spirits, beer, whatever it is. Like maybe that's the difference they need in their life to go from being, why is not everything falling together? I'm feeling a bit shit the whole time, to actually going, hey, I'm actually going to drink maybe once a week now instead of like 4 times a week. And maybe that's the shift that they need, that they can feel way better from. For some people, I mean, I'm set in a position, I know you feel the same, where I could probably have a drink now and probably keep it under control. And, I got married in December and everyone was like, are you going to drink at your wedding? And I was like, nah, because I was like, 1, terrified, but 2, I
don't
just kind of
this podcast either. Man. We work hard for this.
Exactly. No, but it's like I just felt that personally, like the big thing for me, right, was social and going to the pub with the boys or finishing session or like the celebratory aspect of alcohol. I found that I still now get the same kick from zeros that I do from that. So from my perspective, I'm like, actually, I don't want it. The thing I miss the most is I'm into my food, is like the wine pairings when you go to a nice restaurant. But that's getting better. That is getting better because they're getting the like Adam Handling's now got like the sort of non-alcoholic wine pairings with his stuff. So's Claire Smith and Outcore. Like everyone's starting to listen in that industry about having zeros and something that can accompany it that sort of does the job almost as well. So, but yeah, like you say, I mean, I think it's great that you understand your relationship with alcohol and that if health is your core thing, then it's not going to play a large part in your life.
I think it is, and it varies. It varies. Like, I have my own aspirations of what I want to be when I'm 40, you know, when I'm 45, when I'm 50. Like I have ideas in my mind, and ultimately alcohol can't really play a role in those plans. Like I know what I'm like when I drink a bit, and I know what I'm like when I'm sober. And if I want to achieve the aggressive, you know, plans that I've set out for myself, I simply won't be able to if I'm a bit pissed. Even if it's the odd drink here and there, it affects me. You know, I'm 35 now. When I was 19, I could drain a whole bottle of whiskey. No worries.
Yep.
But I can't do that now. And I don't really want to do that now. It feels to me like a lot of people have almost woken up to the idea that alcohol is really bad for you. I think it's been obvious anyway, but it's just that there has and certainly seems to be a kind of societal shift in behavior. And I'm not suggesting that people don't drink anymore, of course they do, but global alcohol sales are down, and the younger generation drink a lot less than we did. And, you know, they live the vast majority of their lives on social media, and they want to put their best feet forward, and they want to look their best, and they want to be founders and entrepreneurs, and they all want to be billionaires, and that's great. Like, cool. You know, rolling out of the Bluebird hammered at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday isn't cool anymore.
It's
right?
really not.
So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's the way I feel that as three sober people, we can kind of have some degree of sanctimonious, you know, views on the whole thing, because it requires discipline. And I think discipline is a really interesting thing, right? Like I talk a lot about discipline, motivation, resilience on my Big Fish podcast. And it's kind of, there's building resilience and being disciplined is quite a fun exercise, you know. And if you've never done it before, it's great to see how far you can test yourself and how far you can go and how far you can push yourself. And for me, alcohol just plays no part in that. Like, I can't tell you what would happen if I went for like a glass of champagne now. Yeah. Like, it's not that I'd become some crazy animal and get locked up. It's just my clear, well thought through mind, in my opinion, would just go to shit.
That's the problem as well, isn't it? Because that clear visioned mind, I'm the same. I could probably go have 2 beers, but then my old thought patterns may come in, which is, I wonder what this person's doing, so I'll text them. Wonder what this person's doing, I'll text them. And even though I probably could have 2 beers, I'm well aware that those 2 beers may become 15 pints and someone's kitchen table at 6 a.m. And I just want to stay away from that. It
doesn't ever feel like a good use of time.
No.
It comes back to the time thing. Like, you know, and this time chat from me is quite new, by the way. So like, I haven't really spoken about it much, but it's kind of, it is interesting. Like, I believe that you will be, like, I think everybody strives for happiness. Right. It's like you get people that claim to strive for success and stuff, but ultimately happiness is kind of at the core of existing well, in my opinion. And if you can be happy all the time, I think most people would take that door, you know, over being a billionaire or whatever else that they, you know, may think that they want. And using your time effectively and productively does, in my experience, make you happy. Right. Like, if I have a day where I've done really good work and, you know, we've had really solid creative sessions at CleanCo and the liquids are tasting good and we're ready to fucking take on the world, I come home feeling great. Right. And it's fun and I love doing it. And that immediately trickles into a nicer evening with your wife. And if your wife is stressed or like anxious about something, the energy you're kicking off will make her feel better.
100%.
Right? And it's kind of like, if I drink, I don't have any of that. Like, you know, so for me, it feels an obvious thing to do. But it's taken a while to really understand it, if you know what I mean.
How did your relationship change with your fiance when you stopped drinking?
You should ask her, but I think she was pretty delighted. It's kind of, I don't think... From that day, I did a 3.5-4 year stint. You might, if you're listening, find it odd that I don't know exactly how long it was, but to be honest, it wasn't really relevant at the time. I'd hung my boots up for life, right? So like, I don't actually remember exactly when it was that I quit or when I started up again. But it's kind of the big difference was that it was a big problem. And it now doesn't feel like a problem at all. Like, it's not on my mind at all. I think that's another thing. Captain Sandy from Below Deck, I interviewed her. She's been sober, I think, 27 years or something.
Sick.
And I was talking to her about this because it was around the time that I just started throwing like the odd drink back in. And she was like, the fact that you're even asking me suggests to me that you know that it's a problem. And I was like, okay then. She was
as scary as you are on telly.
She was like, you're talking to me about it, and you're coming at it in a really calculated way. Like, it used to be this, and now it's not this, and I think I can do this, and actually it doesn't bother. And she was like, you're thinking about it loads.
Yeah.
And she was like, if you can't just like have a beer and it mean nothing, and you're having to justify it loads.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't think you're ready for it, or whatever. She's like, that's just her personal opinion.
Yeah.
She was like, I'd love to smoke some weed. I'd love to have a drink, but she was like, I don't trust myself, even after all this time, for that to go well. I went to AA probably 4 times in total. And at first, one of my friends sent me to the Kilburn men's meeting, and it was a real eye-opener, right? And I felt really out of place because, in my opinion, my problems compared to the problems of some of the people there were so minor, really. And I think alcoholism is obviously an issue, but it kind of felt like, okay, like I feel out of place being here. And I found it really interesting that there were people in that meeting who had been sober for 20 plus years, who still took it a day at a time, who still considered themselves really lucky to fall asleep, not hammered. And it kind of, that was one of the reasons that I found AA, aside from the very strong religious tilt on it, that I just found it difficult. I said to one of the guys, I was like, you've been sober longer than you've been drunk. Like, why is it that you still approach it in this, I'm not going to drink today, and I really feel like... I was like, surely you don't feel like drinking. You haven't drank in 25 years or whatever it is. And they just said, if I allow myself to think like that, I'll go and get fucked up. Yeah. And I was just like, okay. And that also made me think like, maybe my mindset is a little bit different to some people in AA.
It's interesting you say that, because one of our first guests, Simon Thomas, who was an amazing guest, but he said a similar thing. He struggled with the notion that someone wasn't able to set themselves free from it. So that, we speak about it a lot. There's so many amazing ways you can recover, and we're huge advocates for AA if people need it. But there's been a couple of guests now that have kind of subscribed to the notion of like, for themselves, they didn't need to, obviously I think everyone does need to take it a day at a time to a respect, but not that they were shackled to the idea of having to go through that process.
Well, he said, he just didn't find it very liberating in the fact that you could be 20 years sober and still have to live under the umbrella of an alcoholic, because he wanted to be like, hey, I'm actually free of this, not still with that brush. So
or just that notion of, I am completely powerless over my behavior. That's just not true, right? Like that's I think it's okay. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. That's not true of me.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like I am in control of my behavior. You can blame whatever you like on picking up a beer or picking up a bottle of whiskey, but ultimately you have the power to put it down, right? Like, and I think if you are. That's my opinion, and by the way, that will be a controversial opinion for lots of alcoholics who feel that they are powerless over their behaviour with booze. What I'm trying to say is, I feel, for me personally, that I have control over whether or not I drink.
Yeah.
There's not been actually an occasion, I think, where I've been drawn to a bar and drank without like being fully conscious of what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean?
I think addiction doesn't have one. So there's not one thing you can put into addiction. You're like, everyone's the same, right? Everyone's got their own journey on addiction,
and you can only speak from your opinion. Yeah, like, and for some people,
but just a caveat. Sorry to interrupt. Everything I'm saying is just my experience.
No, of course.
I'm not. This is not. Please don't take this as advice or be offended by anything. This is my journey, if you will.
No, of course. And like everyone's relationship and everyone's journey into sobriety is different. And for a lot of people. We had Matt Willis on, and he's been on a remarkable journey. But for him, it was like the easiest drink to say no to is the first drink, and that's his like mantra for him, because he knows that one is the route to all hell.
Me, Sniff City, bitch.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's my biggest fear.
All hell. All hell is such a violent
See you
force,
later.
And still, like, going back to it, that's my biggest fear, is like that one beer and then suddenly all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, that's it.
Like,
you've lost everything. Wake up four years later.
And that's so funny you say that, because that was precisely the message in the Kilburn men's meeting that I went to. Was like, you may feel that your problems aren't as bad as his, but keep going and they'll be as bad as his.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't compare yourself to other people, blah, blah, blah. But it was quite a sobering, intentionally thought, right? No, but it's true though, because it's, you know, the friend that sent me there literally said to me, if you continue to get fucked up in the way that you're getting fucked up, you will lose everything. Like you know, your wife will divorce you. She will get custody of the one child at the time. You know, you can lose all your work. You will be unemployable. You will lose your home. You know, she might take it. You know, your parents will grow bored of having to be there for you. You know, and you know, your brothers and sisters may turn their back on you after a period of time because you're simply not listening to good advice, right? And it's kind of, that's the definition of a lost cause, surely.
It's fascinating you say that, because I was reading something the other day about, we say the term alcoholic, and we spoke about this in a previous podcast, of that view when someone says that word is someone on a park bench, you know, but none of us are that far away from that if we let it go a certain way. And I thought that was a really interesting point, because it seems distant, especially when you're drinking. If you're fucked up and you're walking down the street and you see someone, you might be like, oh, that's really sad. But you're not thinking in your head, like, actually, I think you spoke about it, like being 4 bad decisions away from that being a reality. It might not be that linear, but do you know what I mean? Like, it can be everybody's reality.
But also people's ability to change and develop resilience and discipline and pull themselves out of hell is astounding. And there are incredible examples of that. You know, I was fortunate enough to interview DJ Fat Tony, who, by the way, get him in here.
Yeah, we'd love to talk to him.
Now you've got to. Like his story was he was my second ever interview on Big Fish. And I literally was just blown away by him, right? Like he's been homeless, toothless, in hospital within inches of his life, heart stopped for a period on a hospital bed. He weighed like 6.5 or 7 stone or something. Like, he's a big guy, but like, so that might be not accurate. Sorry, I might be thinking about something. But in any case, it's skin and bone, heroin addict, crack addict. You know, like the kind of person that you might see on the side of the street and, well, firstly choose to ignore, because you just wouldn't know where to begin. It's a write-off, right? It's kind of like, and you may, even if you're the most empathetic person in the world, what's 20 quid going to do to help this lad? Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it was quite a harrowing, you know, horrific account of where he was, right? And sober many years now, you look at him now, you know, he then developed an incredible career as a DJ, you know, became Kate Moss's best mate, became a celebrity. It's kind of like, for that, like your rock bottom is very different to my rock bottom. I'm getting hammered on my own in my lovely house. You know, you're like homeless with no teeth, you know, within an inch of your life on the street. It's different, right? And if he can do it, anyone can do it. And I think that is like, it's awesome to hear stories like that. And that is through building resilience, right? And it's kind of like, I think if you can test yourself and, you know, even take measures to build resilience, I think resilience is one of the most interesting tools you could try to harness.
Amazing.
Let's talk about CleanCo and the inception of CleanCo, and, you know, was it from going sober for that period of time that you were like, right, I'm going to go and, you know, there's a gap in the market, I'm going to go and take it by storm? Was it all part of it, or was it a separate entity altogether?
No, completely all part of it. If you were to tell me on those nights where I was hammered at home that I was going to found, you know, a really, really fast growing startup in the UK that would be, widely hailed as one of the most interesting non-alcoholic startups around, I would have pissed myself laughing, right? Because it's just like I just didn't have any kind of
fuck off.
I had no skills of any kind, right, in business or entrepreneurship, and that idea came to me about 3 to 4 months into total abstinence, right? And I, like you, was a very social person, and I would miss the drinking element of being out and about, and I would try to not let it affect my social life. So I would still go out, I would still meet my friends, because I didn't want to become this sober hermit. I was about to say hermit crab, but it's just a hermit.
Mate, whatever floats your boat.
The sober hermit crab. So I didn't want to be a sober hermit crab. I wanted to be myself, right? And I found that I had just as much energy, if not more energy, when I was sober. I guess I'm lucky in that regard. I've always been quite a confident person, so I had the tools, I suppose, in my artillery anyway to be a good sober person, thankfully. And I would notice, non-alcoholic beer was a thing. Non-alcoholic beer, just in passing, has been around for about 28 years. There was a non-alcoholic beer in Ireland called Caliber many years ago, but it was just not great, right? So it just didn't catch on, quite watery. But now with kind of, Heineken Zero and Lucky Saint and, independent and, big global brands going into non-alcoholic beer in a really meaningful way meant that, so many millions of marketing dollars were pumped behind campaigns to push the products, because the products were finally good enough for the consumer to want them, right? It's a desire versus compromise kind of scale. It's like, I feel like a beer, but I'm going to drink a Caliber. That's a big compromise. Whereas like now you can, I feel like a beer, I'm going to have Lucky Saint, no compromise, great, boom, I'm in. And that's kind of how that worked. And there was nothing in spirits really. Seedlip existed. I think Seedlip is an awesome concept, and at the time I thought it was really interesting, right? I went to a party and somebody said, do you want a non-alcoholic gin and tonic? And I was like, what the fuck is that? I'd been sober 4 months, I'd never heard of it. Lots of people knew I was sober and they'd never suggested it to me. I'd never seen it marketed or advertised, and I looked at it and I thought, this is like insane. And I mixed it with tonic, and I was like mad for it. Like my brain went into overdrive of like, how is this the only thing like this? What the hell? Went back, got in touch with Seedlip, said, I'd love to be involved somewhere or another. They very very kindly just said, we don't really work with influencers, I think they called me, which of course was disgusting. And then
like I nearly started drinking
no offense to
which I take no offense to at all. And they said, they basically said that they work with barmen and Michelin star chefs, and that's where they are in their journey. And I said, fine, whatever. So I knew straight away that I wanted to be in non-alcoholic spirits. And the fact that only they existed and that there was no real market data to support my feeling meant nothing to me at the time at all. I just had this kind of fire in my belly to go out and do something, and kind of became completely obsessed with it. And I don't use the word lightly. I literally, everything else just stopped. And I was like, right, I'm going to go and found the best non-alcoholic company in the world. I traveled around all over the UK, and I flew over to Ireland, and I went from brewery to brewery to distillery, probably went to 20 of them, trying to find somebody to make me a non-alcoholic gin. And I was really curious that Seedlip didn't refer to themselves as gin at all, right? It was and they don't use juniper or anything that's even remotely ginny in their products. It's just people that refer to it as a non-alcoholic gin. It's not a gin. And they don't even pretend to be a gin, right? So I was like, I'm going to be the world's first non-alcoholic gin. And Anyway, long story short, came up with a product and branded it. We were called the Clean Liquor Company back then, and it was great. We got into loads of trouble and trod on loads of toes, and we called ourselves a gin, and it turns out it's illegal to call yourself a gin. So,
but you were disruptive, right?
Yeah, we were sued by the Gin Guild, whoever they are. And
some guys there like, my name's Jim from the Gin Guild. Like, the fuck are you?
And no, the whole thing actually was really fun, and we had a whole Wolf of Wall Street thing going, and just being, fun disruptors in a kind of non-existent market. We got Sainsbury's on board and launched into like 400 Sainsbury's stores. And then I started grating away at like, we're literally competing with just Seedlip. Why don't we build a portfolio brand and do every spirit, rum, whiskey, tequila, gin, vodka, flavored gins, and have this portfolio play? Because ultimately I thought it would make us more attractive as a non-alcoholic offering. If I can offer you any cocktail you want without the alcohol, you may be a margarita drinker, you might be a gin and tonic drinker. Cool, we got tequila for you, gin for you. Instead of like being, shoehorned into just one category, why not cover all of it? And fast forward with the largest independent non-alcoholic spirits brand in the UK, and we're knocking on that door in the States as well. We're right up there. And in terms of global volume sales, we are the largest independent spirits brand in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congrats.
That's cool. That's a massive achievement.
And I guess something that you can hark or place on a sober journey. Because we talk about this all the time with people. It's like, we talk about it all the time. Would this have happened had I still drank? And this is a very black and white, it's no.
Impossible.
Yeah.
But like, it's not even within the realms of possibility. It's a different game, different sport. Like no way. And with CleanCo, we had so many incredible, and this further fueled the sobriety, just so many awesome meetings with like insane people that like I was suddenly kind of getting access to, because the startup was such a cool, interesting idea to these people. We Lightspeed, which is one of the largest venture funds in the world, did £1 million into my friends and family round, right? Wow. Like we had nothing at all. We had just the idea and bits and bobs. I had lunch with this incredible woman called Nicole Quinn, who's a director of Lightspeed, and she just bought into it and loved it, and it just helped us get going. And it was just so exciting. It kind of felt like, like my favorite kind of films are, I love The Social Network. Yeah. I love films where kind of companies are built quickly. I love that. Oh God, what's that bloody film with? You can edit this to make me sound cool, yeah. Okay. There's it's Steve Carell's in it. He's a kind of, he works for a big bank, and it's Ryan Gosling is in it. Sorry, I'm going mad.
No, I know. Gee, come on, you must know it. G's on the Google.
You do know it, come on. It's when the housing market collapses in the States.
Big Short?
Yes.
Big Short.
Okay,
go.
So, and The Big Short. Yeah. That's to be just bolted on to the end of Social Network, Big Short. But just like feel good kind of business films where people make loads of money, right? I've always loved it. And it's kind of like, I kind of felt like I was on that path, and it was just so exciting to go from, like, in my opinion, again, drunk loser to like really exciting entrepreneur who's getting like recognition from Lightspeed, and that was quick as well. That happened within 6 months.
I love that.
And it was kind of just very, very exciting for me. My wife was incredibly bored about hearing.
Mate, I think we're like it with the podcast. Anyone's like, oh, fuck.
It's going to be $1 billion company in the next 2 years. Like,
I think my wife's sick of it.
Let's buy a big house. And she's like, whoa, have you sold a bottle yet?
Well, I must admit, right, we're big advocates on the podcast for talking about, non-alcoholic drinks, beers, spirits that we like. And I think a lot of our listeners and people that are sober curious are worried that, one, that kind of social life stops when you stop drinking, which we're here to say is not at all the case. In fact, quite the opposite. And I mentioned it, I think, before the pod, but I love going out for food, finding place that serve non-alcoholic drink. Went to Hakkasan on Friday, and I pretty much had every single non-alcoholic cocktail on the menu, which
they're clean cocktails, by the way.
Yeah. And from CleanCo. And I fucking loved it. And, you know, and we went down there, and Simon, our good friend Simon, who's there, got us down to actually try them in the first place.
Big old smoky band.
Yeah, and they make like, you know, they make an experience out of it, and you're treated the same as if it was an alcoholic thing. They come over and they have all like what do they call it? The dry ice.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. And it's great. And I get the same kick from it. And, you know, my wife had a couple of the alcoholic ones and then tried the non-alcoholic ones and preferred them. So
what does your wife think of you now that you're sober?
She likes me a lot more.
Well, she may not have been your wife.
Yeah, she probably would have been, you know, no, she's...
It's a common theme, is it?
Yeah. I think like everything is, you know, I think one of the things that sobriety brings is that everyone else around you benefits massively from you just being, and, you know, being more present, being more driven. Like you said, the time aspect of stuff, we refer to it as like the 8th day in the week. When you stop drinking, suddenly it's like, oh shit, there's another day somewhere.
Particularly children as well.
Yeah.
Like if you're listening to this and you have kids, like kids notice everything.
Yeah.
Like, and it's quite alarming actually to think about that. You know, our 5-year-olds, they are like little people now. They know. They can tell if you're arguing with your wife, even if you're hiding it quite well. They can feel the energy in the room. They can tell if you're, you know, they can tell if you are pent up and stressed. Oh, one thing I was going to say to you. My wife is quite a naturally anxious person. So like she will worry about lots of things, like being burgled and like you know, like she has an irrational fear of flying. By the way, if you're worried about flying, you're 8 times more likely to die in the car on the way to the airport, right, than you are on the planes. Just keep that.
People driving in their cars now are like, fuck.
Yeah. Just keep that in mind, right? Like air travel remains one of the safest ways to travel, right?
Yeah.
So I try and
Is
explain
that your BA endorsement coming in there? Skyscanner is available.
Yeah, exactly. I tell my wife this, but regardless of that, you know, taking off and landing, she absolutely hates it, and it's an irrational fear. And at night, you know, something might move on the terrace, and you know, she just immediately thinks it's a burglar, and it's fine. It's not a big problem, by the way, but she has a natural level of anxiety to her, and she hasn't drank now for several weeks, and she said that all of her anxiety is gone. And again, I'm not a doctor, but you know, it can only be a good thing, right? Like ridding your body of what's essentially toxic poison. I'm not anti-alcohol, but you know, being very health conscious, it's an incredibly unhealthy thing to be doing.
No, it's so true. I was actually saying to Tom when we were catching up this morning, like, I'll still get anxious about work or stressed about work, but I know the root cause of it now. Yeah. I think when you have alcohol in your system, there could be a whole plethora of things, and you wake up and you're like, fuck, I feel awful. And it's like, is it my relationship, my family, my work, this client? You don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I think what sobriety brings is clarity, that it just lessens all of that. And the thing is, we talk about sobriety, like life does, your emotions do become more linear, which is a beautiful thing. Yeah. Your highs may not be as high, your lows may not be as low, but I think what it brings is the ability to make those highs when they happen fucking amazing, because you deserve them, because you've worked hard for them.
Was it John Mayer, I think, who said that he was trying to explain sobriety in an interview, and he said something like, at first, sobriety may be mistaken for boredom, and it might feel boring, but if you just persist with it for long enough, you'll find that everything about who you want to be becomes just much more straightforward, easier, and kind of like life is essentially exaggerated if you're able to just persevere through, you know, the first few stages. It's like jiu-jitsu, what I was telling you about.
Yes. Me and Tom are going to go for a roll around. Is that what you used to call it, a roll around?
It's a roll. It's a roll.
Okay, because a roll around would mean something else back where I was from.
Yeah. No, we're going to roll around.
It's
the same with jiu-jitsu, but like, you know, the first 3, 4, 5 weeks of rolling, you're going to feel useless. You're going to feel very unmotivated to get back in the gym, because all that's happening is you're just getting crushed and flattened and strangled and armbarred by people that you probably would assume that you could absolutely hammer in a fight in the street. And it's really demoralizing. But if you, like everything in life, if you stick at it and you put in the time on the mats, it's called, and you can take this analogy and use it anywhere, business, with sobriety, whatever, time on the mats equals skill that comes in, which equals, you know, enjoying it more. You know, being good at stuff is quite infectious, right? You like the better you get at things, the more you enjoy doing them, the less motivated you need to be in order to do them and achieve, what you would have thought was a really difficult thing to achieve.
I agree. I fully agree with that. For me, it was running. I did the marathon last year, and I never would have thought when I was drinking that was possible. And then actually I saw you, was it you yesterday was running out on a half marathon just at lunchtime?
I did do that yesterday.
Yeah, so that's when I got into the habit of just like, I was like,
I didn't realise you'd be mentioning it.
I saw your video and you were like, it's a cheeky half marathon at midday. I was like, fucking hell.
I'm training for a world record attempt.
Amazing.
Again, it's a kind of, resilience discipline thing. I love having a massive goal. I genuinely don't know if I'm going to be able to do what we've set aside to do, right. Which for me makes it really exciting and interesting, but it's going to involve a lot of running. Amazing. And it's going to be an incredible adventure. I wish I could say exactly what it was, but the reason I'm not is not to hold it back. We don't actually fully understand what it's going to be completely yet, but we do know that the distance is crazy, 6 times the longest ultra I've ever done type thing.
Wow.
Yeah, no, and it's going to be a great big thing, a world record if achieved. And that kind of thing helps me stay on track, right? Because it's kind of like, I have no interest in drinking anything at all now until I've handled that. And that's several months away. And I just don't want anything getting in the way of it, to be honest. So it's kind of, I'm really excited by it. We're hoping to raise a lot of money, to make as much difference to as many people as possible.
Oh, that's incredible.
That's great. Have you seen that guy, that hardest geezer?
I have, yeah. Gave him a shout out on the pod yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
Yeah, he's fucking killing it.
Well, if we're going to talk about him as well, I think it's important to say, he's raised about 118,000, something like that, and it's a lot of money. But I think what he's putting himself through, he deserves more. So any plugs for this guy, it is so deserved. He's ran on average, I think, about 50k per day over the course of lots of time, over like 271 days or so, 9 months.
And I think what's crazy, it's not just the distance or the heat, it's actually some of the cultural, political situations he's putting himself in, where visas, or you might get stopped at border by security.
Well, I saw
he's scary as fuck.
He's stuck currently at the border of somewhere, hasn't been granted
having a few days off, is he?
yeah. Lazy.
It's not that impressive.
Not so hard anymore, are you?
Yeah. Hang on a sec, he gets to sit down. All right.
Not on. But no, he's done 13 countries so far, and he's going. What is he from he's gone from the south of Africa
to Morocco, is it, or Egypt?
He's going south to north. But it's incredible what he's doing, and good on him. I can't say what my challenge is.
No, that's exciting.
I look forward to seeing what it will be. Tom, and you doing it, of course.
I can't wait. Well, listen. Well, hopefully, if it's achieved, I'll come back on and we can chat about it.
Yeah, perfect. You're looking at me as if it's time for the big 3.
I think it might be.
We end our podcast each week with 3 big questions. And if you're ready for them.
Yeah.
I think
of course, I'm not ready for them because I didn't read the brief.
Yeah, that's perfect though.
On purpose.
That's good.
Don't like being prepared for stuff like this.
No.
Better just to wing it.
Exactly.
Right, let's do it then. So, number 1, single best thing for you that sobriety, or let's call it sustained periods without alcohol, has brought you into your life?
The single best thing. Relationships with family.
Right.
I'd say. And I was thinking there about saying, clarity of mind and health and stuff, but actually it's I have been brought closer to my immediate family through sobriety. I know that my dad is proud of me, and I know that my mum is proud of me, and I'm not sure that was always the case. Even though parents might say it is, I'm proud of you, son, but I know that it's true now.
Yeah.
And that makes
that's lovely.
It means something to me that my parents are happy with me.
That's great. That's really nice to hear.
That's lovely.
Question 2, for anyone thinking about going on a journey of sobriety, what's the sort of best piece of advice you could give them?
That in all of my years of life, I have never met a single person that has embarked on a sober journey that has regretted it.
Yeah.
Powerful. That's great advice. And it's very true.
That is very true.
And, there's always some reason to drink, maybe wait until a Monday morning, but just start now and set yourself maybe bite-sized chunks at the beginning. Do a Chip Summers and do a week.
Yeah.
Denzel Washington once said, if you can't do a week, like at will without drinking, then it's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, if you're listening to this and you've been inspired in any way by these two gentlemen and their sober mission, just give it a go. And also, I don't know, I personally, having done it before, wouldn't necessarily go down the right, I'm never drinking ever again route. I would just say, you know, I'm going to give it a good go and just experience the benefits for myself.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, that's what I did. I did the 100 days. I was like, I'm giving myself 100 days. Got to 100, went, let's keep going. You know,
yeah.
I think for most people.
Here you are. You got a very expensive podcast that costs us loads of money.
Jamie
just gave up all the drugs and alcohol and just spending it all on content.
Hey, it's gonna come good.
It's gonna come good. And question 3, we would like you now, 2024, Spencer, to write a letter to drunk, crazy, chaotic Spencer. So if you could start with, Dear Spencer.
Now,
what would you say to yourself?
Crikey.
So you're like, fuck, I should have read that brief.
Yeah. Wish I'd read the bloody brief, yeah. Just before diving into the letter, when people ask me if I ever regret anything in life, I love to say no, right? They're like, no, I don't regret anything. In truth, I think the reality is I do regret, like, or wish I could change, just growing up a little bit faster with regard to this stuff. You know, I think around the age of 30, I started to make some very significant changes. I feel like I wasted some of my 20s, right? Like it wasn't, and back to one of the first things you said, that one of our, you know, we all have great memories of good times in our lives that included alcohol. I have lots of those, but I also feel that I would love to have 3 or 4 of those years back, right?
I feel the exact same.
Just because nothing was achieved at all. And it just feels like a waste, right? Like I look at some 25, 26-year-olds, I don't envy them at all, but they're some of them are so switched on. I'm like, where could I be? Right. And it's just a little itch. It's not something that kind of bothers me or keeps me up at night. And I know that it's something that I can't change. It's
just hindsight, isn't it?
Not even with your time machine.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Welcome to use it anytime.
At Global, they have a real time machine, by the way.
Yeah, sorry, Ashley, I don't have that kind of money.
And so I don't know. I think, again, something that we touched on earlier, like I needed those lows to understand these highs, and I needed those lows to want to change. And without those experiences, this would almost be less meaningful.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change too much. I was a big hedonist for 14 years. 10 years would have been fine.
Yeah, I'm the exact same man. If I could have stopped at 28, exactly.
I could have cherry-picked a couple of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe put it in your letter.
Okay. Dear Spencer, there's no doubt that you're a great guy. But, and you'd have to paraphrase it like that to a drunk, by the way. You can't just go in hard, because otherwise the letter will be in the bin.
But already
it's on fire.
Yeah, the letter's on fire before you get to the kind regards at the end. No, so I would say to myself, try taking a step back and having a look at what you're doing and how you're spending your time and who you're spending your time with, and ask yourself whether that kind of behavior is what you want to be known as. And the further you dig yourself, the further you dig yourself in, the harder it's going to be to get out. So, in retrospect, and from the future, I know that you should lift your foot off the gas a bit and have a little bit of a reassessment. And your brother, who you think is absolutely insane for working so hard and pushing himself and running the Marathon des Sables, etc., isn't insane. He just has a grip on life, and you should try and be more like him. It's not the best letter, but
that's great.
But listen, off the cuff.
I love it. There you go.
But I think that's another funny point. Sorry, I realise we're probably concluding the pod, but I think there used to be such a crazy difference between my brother and I, to the point where we don't even look alike either, by the way. So it was almost like, there were jokes that, I was the milkman's son, or he was the, whatever, that we weren't, that we probably weren't related, because he was so different, motivated, honest, like just completely admirable in every sense of the word. My brother always was just a complete truth teller, hard-working animal, right? Who just like trained and did tons for charity, and just was just the opposite of this like selfish inferno that I was. And I would live with him. He'd be kind enough to let me live with him. And I used to just think I'd written off us ever being very close or similar, because I was just like, he just is different to me, all right? And when I first went sober, the meaningful time that I went sober, I became more and more like him, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, and I mentioned it to him that, I felt like we were becoming more similar, which he didn't really see to begin with, because of the years of, he was like, okay. But, now, fast forward, so many years, and our oldest sons are a really similar age. And I went and spent the night with him at his home, and Vogue wasn't there, and neither was his wife. And we put our kids to bed and watched kind of Gladiator, and spoke about the family business and like our involvement in it, over the next 15 years and what that might look like. And we just really felt like brothers.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have that without sobriety.
That's amazing, man.
That's great, man.
I'm sure everyone's very proud of you for the journey you've gone on, because you're building something really exciting.
Thank you.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on. That's been great.
Mate, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. I'm looking forward to the airing, mate. It was a real pleasure to chat to you guys, and thanks so much for having me.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.